pretty much a coaster fest going on today, but hang on, because in the middle of the video, I've got an interesting story about this one. You don't want to miss it. Howdy, y'all. This is Clara Lawrence, and this is part of my project that I worked on with Artapalooza. So, me and a bunch of girls, Tish Winters of the Artist Haven, put together a live with a bunch of different artists, basically having an art party together, bringing their own thing, and several of us ended up doing coasters, so I just jumped in and did some. I had a couple here, like I had one that had a layer of gold, and 3 of these that had some holographic films that I wanted to do another layer on. And then I started thinking, it's like, I'm going to just have fun with this, and did some extra different layers. Like I had some leftover shells, so I started doing some of that, and you can tell they're still rough, so I need to add another coat, and that'll be later in the video that I do that. Actually, on most of these, I'm going to do a second coat to get them nice and glossied over. But I do have an interesting story that I'm going to share in a little while, so stay tuned for that, because you're going to want to hear that, because it's a nice, sweet story. So, for now, we'll continue on so that you can watch the little coaster fest. Later. Okay, I promised a little story about these two. Now, I'm going to use one of them. I think I'm going to use this one to do the extra step for the special effect. Now, this right here, believe it or not, is coffee grinds. Which sounds really, really silly, but when you hear the why, everything will make sense. But the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to put some clear on this and add a little bit of white and kind of froth it up a little bit, like as if, you know, maybe there's milk in it that isn't completely mixed up. But my son, for his first year in college, he was checking out the lab over in the STEM building, and they had a 3D printer. And he wanted to do something special for his dad to say thank you for all the support with college and stuff like that. So he printed him out a little molecule of caffeine, especially since his daddy is a huge fan of coffee. Okay, it's my life ambition to make sure the man never runs out of coffee. It'll make life a lot easier between us. Hint. So he always has coffee around. And my son Mikey knows this. So he made it and he says, look, Dad's a coaster. Well, it's kind of an awkward shape for a coaster. And I told my hubby, hey, I'm doing a bunch of coasters tonight. I'm like, do you want me to embed this in resin? And he was like, oh, yes, please. Please do that. That would be great. That way he'll still see me using it, but I can actually use it because I'm always worried about my cup tipping over on it. So that's what's going to happen, and that's why I'm going to put it clear with a little bit of white, so that way there's a little bit of contrast for this little piece to go into place. And then a little bit of clear, obviously, over top of this. So this is probably going to need another couple of layers. And since it's so lightweight, I'm literally going to put it in and let it cure with just a very thin coat of resin before I apply any of the others, so that way it acts more like a glue. So that's the story behind this guy. So, and then these guys here, well, I just have my glitter stash, and I've got a whole bunch of glitters, and I'll pivot around and show you the glitters towards the end of this video. But there's also a silver flake in here. There's a couple of these glitters that are a mixture of a bunch of different things. And then I had some shells, itty bitty shells left over from a tray project. So I did some, and that's just the first layer of that with some iridescent bling in there. And then this has got a holographic film, which will make itself a little bit more known once I pull it out of the mold. But I think every one of these guys is going to get definitely a clear coat on top, because there's even a little bit of texture with this silver flake. Yeah, and some of the iridescent flake, because it's not a smooth, tiny little bits, meaning as far as size-wise, they have a tendency to be a little chunkier. So, and there's my other shell. And this is some holographic glitter, a couple different sizes of it. So let me see if I can bring you in. So, I lied. So there's some iridescent glitter in there. There's some really teeny, tiny little clear iridescence. And then I got holographic glitter in multiple sizes, as well as the halo glitter from Just Resin in there too. So that sucker just ought to be like a little disco ball of color. And then this one here is, I believe it's called Seahorse, and I'll show you guys that later. So a lot of mixture, just playing around, having fun with it. Oh, and I also, with the Seahorse, I put in some tint from Just Resin. It's one of their inks to pink it up a little bit. It's still going to be transparent when it comes out. So, and also, I'll also have the reveal at the end of this video too, so watch out for that. All right. Until then, later. All right, so these guys need a little bit more as far as resin. This one doesn't need it, but this one definitely does. You can still see the texture of the 3D printing. And then these, of course, with the shells and stuff. So, what I thought I'd do, let me go ahead and pour it into this so it has a chance to settle. And then I can hit it with the bubbles, the heat, to get rid of the bubbles. A little more. Maybe I will do a little more on this. If anything, it'll help protect the white. Okay. So that is done for now. We'll let that scooch around. All right, maybe a little more. So far it doesn't look like I've had any problems with the coffee. So I'm real happy about that. I have to admit, I am real excited to see what that looks like when I pull it out of the mold. I have no idea. Okay, so this is a little bit of resin with some of the Bling It Sparkle. It's that interference color. But this, the sparkle is it's kind of glittery like, but it's still all micas. And I'm just going to put some in some areas so it'll play with the texture a little bit. But most of it's going to be clear resin that'll go on top. Because I just can't help but do a little bit more. I'm just kind of wondering. Just to get it started with spreading out a little bit. Since it isn't super textury, it's a little textury, it's a term. No hope of the clear. All right. Look like it went all the way around. Yep. All right. So I'm going to do is agitate the interference just a little bit. It shouldn't come off opaque. It should be still clearish. So that way you can still see things around them. But just add something, you know, when the light hits it just right. All right, I think I've got enough that this might be my final coat, so yay. Now you can see that this is a little bit on the opaque side. It's a good example of bubbles. I'm going to lean this over a little bit and zoom in. So you see all of the bazillion little bubbles. I'm going to let this sit for about maybe 10-15 minutes, hit it with the heat, and then more bubbles will come to the surface, and then I'll hit it with the heat again after 15 minutes. And that should take care of that. So, zoom back out. I like the little one button. That comes in handy. I'm doing these videos on my iPhone, and it seems to be doing a very good job. All right, so until later, I'll show you the reveal of the finished coasters. So until then, see ya. I usually do a photo at the end of the video, but I thought I would talk it through on this one because I'm not afraid of mixing colors together, for one thing, and I thought I'd have fun with mixing glitters together too. So this is the, for example, this is the Chunky Seahorse from Just For You. What is it? Online UK, yes. They have an amazing sort of really unique glitters. I don't know if you can really see that. Here, let me zoom in. Ready? A lot of fun. They have some mermaid glitters and different iridescent glitters. Just a whole lot of fun if you're really liking glitters. All right, bring it back out. And see, when you add it into glitter, it can get transparent, and you know, the stuff gets really loose. So what I end up doing is I put a lot more in than normal because glitter doesn't really dissolve in resin, so you can really vamp it up and make it thick. The other thing I wanted to do is, because of the resin being clear on this, I wanted the resin to have a color. So I add a couple drops of this in there, and this is the magenta color. And it just tints it up enough that it's pink, but you can still see the glitter showing through. So it didn't distort the glitter much at all, if any. Okay, so, and then in this case, my iridescent glitter, since I had a sheet of like an iridescent film, I wanted to play off of the iridescent glitter. And you can see on the top here how it's got unusual chunks and sizes. So they're small, but they're really chewed up, and then you get some occasional big ones in there. But I also like to have a variety of sizes in there, so that way the light really catches with things. So one of the things I usually add in here is either diamond dust, or in this case I added Snow White by Just Resin, their glitter, which is a very almost a transparent iridescent glitter. And you can see on that it's got a lot of bling and wow factor. So that very fine mixed in with those chunky bits there make for kind of a fun little mixture. So don't be afraid to mix your glitters together. So that's that pairing there. Oh, and I'm going to have to dig in to find out what this is, but I'll put the link in the descriptions because I know I got this on Amazon and my container came busted, so I had to find a container for it. That's why I don't have a label of this at all. But even this one, let's see on the bottom, it automatically comes with two different sizes. There's a bigger one and a smaller size, but of course I had to go another step. And then this is the Silver Halo from Just Resin, which I always say is like a disco ball in a cup, pretty much. So that super fine glitter with this multi-size glitter really works really well together. So there's that. And then this is basically silver leaf, but chopped up. So there's probably things that like projects were made off of, they got rubbed off, and you got those little bits left over, and they saved those up for later use. However, be mindful when you open this stuff up. It is super light and fluffy and will float in the air. So just, you know, very carefully grab and transfer to cup. And then put the lid on this right away because you're going to have silver floating around. Even though you can see this is a pretty good flake size, it is still very lightweight. So just mindful. I mean, there's like no weight to this at all. And I think this is going to last me a lifetime pretty much. So that's the deal with the glitters that I was playing with. And I'll also put the link down in the description for the shells as well, so you can play with that. And coffee grinds, well, I think we all have our fair share of coffee grinds, so I'm not worried about the link too much. Oh, well, if you need to know specifically, it was Starbucks. It was either Sumatra or Komodo Dragon. That's his flavors. So I don't think you guys need that. Anyway, I will still put a still photo in that, but I wanted to talk you through what I did. All right. Later.